I do want to start off with, I guess, just to thank the minister locally on project of Route 10. Her and I had met on several occasions, a couple occasions, I should say, on Route 10, which has a lot of wildlife collisions and some of the incidents that have happened over the years. And the minister's been very accommodating, as well as the staff, to get information and to try to find some resolution to keep me updated. They've done a great job, so I just want to say thanks for that. There's no question, as my colleague just said, that roads in rural New Brunswick is probably the biggest amount of phone calls and emails that most MLAs get. And it's my understanding that New Brunswick has more roads per capita than any other province in Canada. I don't know if that's ever been quantified or if that's just kind of a thought. But I think it does go to the fact that we do have a lot of roads here which require a lot of maintenance and a lot of upkeep. For my area, I mean, Highway 10 is the main artery really from Chipman into Fredericton, which takes in all of Grand Lake, Minto, the whole population. Really the main way to Fredericton is by Highway 10. And I guess I just want to say that, you know, work done on Highway 10, whether it's wildlife mitigation for collisions, you know, asphalt paving, upkeep is important. There is still a lot of work, of course, to be done. But when you get away from the highways and you get into some of the subdivisions, I get a lot of emails in places like Pepper Creek, Majorville on Portobello Drive, you know, different areas around the riding, closer down to Grand Lake, down Newcastle Centre, about roads. And I'm just wondering, and some of these roads, I have to say, because I sometimes will go down and do a visual inspection myself so I can understand, but some of these roads in some of these rural areas and subdivisions, some of them even you know, heavily populated, like Pepper Creek, it just seems to be really, really bad. And I'm just wondering from the department, is there any plan, I guess, over time to ensure that these roads are at least up to a reasonable standard? And, you know, year after year, of course, we do some, you know, filling potholes, but I mean really to go over some of these roads. And I guess I'm just curious if the minister could outline the plan for some of these roads that aren't necessarily highways, but in subdivisions in those areas.
Through the chair to the member opposite, I can tell you that I too get these phone calls and emails, and I don't know if it was in my speech or whatnot, but I can assure you every single email I get, the person thinks they live on the worst road in New Brunswick. And that's the reality that we are living with DTI. We have a fixed budget and we're trying to balance the needs of the entire province, and we have to sometimes make decisions. Do we fix a portion of, for example, Route 11, which we were discussing earlier, or a subdivision road? And I'm happy to say that our budget has increased for asphalt and paving this year by $19 million, so we have additional funds to be able to put towards improving our roadway infrastructure. But the reality is we have 22,800 kilometers of roads, and we are the third most roadway per capita in the country. And we're a very small little province, and we're balancing maintaining those things. So we use asset management to choose the roads we make the investment and improvements in. If I had an unlimited budget, I would fix everybody's road for them, because I've driven on some of those roads and I agree they're not great. But at the end of the day, part of our job is to balance the budget that we have been allocated and make the best choices we can for improvements, and continue to send them in to us and tell them where they are, and we'll continue to assess them each year and make some decisions about which ones get upgraded and which ones don't. And we will make our best decisions we possibly can, and any support you can give us to find more funding and anything you can do to help us do more work, we're happy to work with you to do that.
Great, thank you, Minister. And I know there's no magic wand in DTI's toolbox. You're working with what you have. You know, I often say, get on my soapbox here for a second, but I often say, you know, when we talk about deficits and annual deficits, government after government, you know, continues to go in debt, Today, we're paying approximately $2 million every day just in interest. $2 million every single day in interest. And that's $2 million that could be going to infrastructure and other needed projects. So obviously, there's a lot of maintenance to be done on highways and roads in the province. I'm wondering, Minister, if you can tell me if there's any projects for new roads, like talking like new builds coming up in this year, not necessarily resurfacing or repaving, but just actual new roads. Is there any of those types of projects going on in the province by DTI?
Through the chair to the member opposite, no, we are not. We have no new roads on our books to be built this year. Now, subdivisions are being built by developers, and they may come into our inventory through the year, but we are building no new roads. We are working on the assets we have, which is a lot. We don't need any more new roads. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. You and I are on the same page with that. I've always said, you know, government needs to scale back, you know, new projects and new builds and focus on what we have, because there's a lot to focus on. The Auditor General's pointed out many times. Specific with the subdivision issue, when a new subdivision goes in, what type of arrangement is made? It's my understanding that any new subdivision is considered private road. DTI won't touch it. Is that correct? Or is there some parameters in place that would allow DTI to take on the responsibility of a road in a subdivision? And what are the requirements around that to do it, if that even exists?
Through the chair to the member, when a subdivision is developed, the developer has the option of building the roadways to DTI standards. And if the developer does build it to DTI standards, we will take over the roadway and maintenance after the subdivision has been completed.
Okay, thank you, Minister. So then basically the standards have to be met. If they're not met, I would assume they could be upgraded to be met and then turned over to DTI? Just
have the building to build it up to standard, and then we would take over the maintenance of that roadway.
okay, thank you. Because I have one subdivision that is considered private. The residents there have been fighting for quite some time to have DTI plow it. They've been paying out of pocket. And they've had some frustrations, I think, with DTI on who does what and when and that sort of thing. So I appreciate that clarity. Getting back to our infrastructure and maintenance, two things I want to talk about is the Centennial Bridge in Miramichi, and I believe it's been brought up here earlier, but Centennial Bridge in Miramichi, as well as the Chipman Bridge. The Centennial Bridge has been ongoing for quite some time in terms of, you know, when and how and that sort of thing, so I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit to that. And the Chipman Bridge is really a big issue. It's down to one lane, and I know the local residents there. We've had many meetings on it. I've gotten letters from the local fire chief in terms of emergency response, because there is a stoplight there because it's down to one lane. The largest sawmill, I believe, east of Quebec, maybe even including Quebec, is in Chipman, Grand Lake Timber. I've gotten letters from those folks saying, look, there's an economic impact to this, as well as, believe it or not, a greenhouse gas impact, because they have to travel further around to deliver their products. So can you kind of give us some idea of what's going to happen with the Centennial Bridge and when, and also Chipman Bridge, when we can expect to have that completed?
Through the chair to the member opposite, I'll talk about the Centennial River Bridge first. Well, I guess it's not River Bridge, it's the Miramichi River Bridge, and called the Centennial Bridge. So, yes, this project has experienced a few bumps along the way, let me say. We put out a large tender, and the bids came back 30% higher than expected. which was more than our budget could bear. So we had to go back out to industry to look at ways to communicate with them, to find ways to do the project in a better, more economical way so that we could fit it within the budget that was allocated for that bridge. And so we're currently doing that, still working on that. But the work has not stopped on the bridge, even though we're still working on how to particularly tender the project and how to get it out in the most economical way possible. We're working on 2 pieces of the project this year. We have a tender for work on the piers that's going out in May, and that work will be conducted this year. Now it's underneath the bridge, so will not impact traffic. And we also will have a tender coming out to move the utility lines on the bridge so that the work, when we're ready to do it on the bridge surface itself, can be conducted. So that will be happening this year. There may be some partial lane closures required this year, but we'll work around that and keep some traffic open while we do that project. We've been working very closely with the city and other stakeholders, keeping them informed of where we are with the process. We're committed to continuing with this project. We will complete this project. The total cost for the project is about $100 million, so it's a major, major project for the Department of Transportation, and we have completion planned for 2025, so work will be ongoing over the next several years to get that project completed. Now, the Salmon River Bridge, which is the one in Chipmont, yes, we are fully aware that there's concerns from industry and the community. They have been very good at communicating with us, letting us know the importance of this bridge. And we are actively working on a replacement bridge. The design work has started. There's some environmental reviews and assessments required, which impacts the timeline. So people might be disappointed that the bridge isn't happening as fast as they want it to, but there's a process that we do have to follow. Now, there are some property acquisition things we are dealing with, and we're working to see if we can speed that up. So, because the timeline right now to start the work is 2023, and we're looking to see if we can speed that timeline up and, through the environmental review process and property acquisition. So we are working on expediting it, but I can't commit that it's going to all come together to make us be able to start earlier than 2023, but we are working, so I can commit we are trying. So yeah, that's kind of the update on the 2 projects.
Thank you, Minister. So just for some clarification, I guess, around the Chipmont Bridge, just so I'm clear, so the holdup on the repairs for that bridge to get it back to a full 2-lane is not budgetary, it's based on environmental assessments and land acquisition. Am I correct on that?
To the member opposite, in a perfect world, we'd be able to repair the bridge and take it back to 2 lanes, but that's not the case with this bridge. It requires a full replacement. The engineering process always includes environmental assessments, property acquisition, so it's all part of the process. But at the end of the day, if we can't get the property, we can't put the bridge where the bridge needs to go. So that would be a limiting factor if we had problems with the property acquisition. So I'm just telling you these 2 things take time and have an impact on the schedule, but it's all part of the normal engineering process, and the engineering for a bridge replacement is significant, and so none of this is unexpected or that there's anything wrong. We're just going to see if we can try to push the timelines a little bit, that's all.
I appreciate that clarification because, there's a lot of discussions going on with that bridge, and there's some perception out there that, government just doesn't want to allocate the money to fix it. And, there's talk of, there's federal dollars on the table. But again, just so I am clear that it's not necessarily an issue of finances per se or budget, but it's more an issue of just it has to go through this environmental process and land acquisition. Okay, thank you for that. With the bridge too, one thing that I found that I could not wrap my head around with that bridge, I was there when it flooded. I've never seen the water that high in that area in my lifetime. And I remember the water, up to obviously the bottom of the bridge and cutting off access to the bridge on one side there. And the discussion then was, was there disaster financial assistance to repair that bridge? And I was told that it didn't qualify, which I found odd. And I'm just wondering if you can help me understand why it wouldn't qualify. I mean, the bridge was working and operational. The flood hit, it shut down. It's been shut down to one lane ever since, but yet they're claiming it's not related to the flood. So I'm just wondering if, and I know it's a federal program, but if you could just maybe offer some insight into that.
Sometimes there's actual real coincidences out there, and the deterioration was not caused by the flood, therefore we could not put it under the Disaster Financial Assistance Program. But we are accessing federal dollars for this bridge through the Strategic Corridors Program. So it's about $50-50 with the federal government through the Strategic Corridors Program. So a coincidence, but the flood did not cause the deterioration.
Okay, thank you, Minister. Just getting back to the environmental assessment, is this a provincial assessment that needs to be done or a federal assessment that needs to be done in terms of the environment?
We're still in the process of asking our counterparts what will be required with this bridge. We do anticipate it will be provincial and federal. We're not anticipating a full EIA process, but we anticipate permitting through DFO and environment.
Okay, thank you, Minister. I just want one more question related to Miramichi. I was under the understanding from the local member there, Member Conroy, that there's no funding allocated for the Miramichi area in terms of, and I assume it's relation to like capital projects and that sort of thing. Can you confirm that or offer any insight if there is indeed any additional funding for the Miramichi area?
For clarity, just her riding or the entire Miramichi area?
Relating more to her right now. She is in the city of Miramichi mostly, but I think she's referring to kind of the outskirts of the city as well that would be under DTI jurisdiction, whether there's any projects planned for that or any additional funding that's allocated.
Back to the Chipman Bridge, we would also need to do First Nations consultation on that one as well, so that'd be another piece of the puzzle that we have to, go through when we're building a new bridge. I'll get you the answer about Miramichi. This is a complicated question because there's a number of ridings around there, and there's a number of different programs where projects would be done through transportation or infrastructure, and maybe I'll answer just for the infrastructure side of things. But there is $11 million being spent on bridges in her riding this year. I mean, that's a very big spend for a riding. So to say she's not getting any spending in her riding doesn't feel exactly correct to me. She may be asking specifically because the city of Miramichi had a request through the municipal designated highway program. And there's a reality with that program where it's a $10 million program and our ask was $61 million. So we have to make some choices based on asset management and asks, and 99 communities ask us for funds through that for that $10 million. So there's a number of different factors that's weighed when those projects are chosen. Miramichi had funding the 8 years prior to this year, so they've done fairly well through that program, and this is the first year they didn't get funded in 8 years.
Thank you, Minister. I appreciate that clarification on the distinction, I guess, between the two. To change topics here a little bit, we're embarking, or government is embarking now on reform, local government reform, municipal reform, and everything that it entails. And as part of that municipal reform project, I think it's inevitable, or at least I would think it's inevitable, that there is going to be some changes to tax structure at some point, or I would argue there should be. If that happens, because other areas, there's other provinces, there's different tax structures and there's different maintenance requirements and different costs that expenditures that go to the local municipality versus the province, this sort of thing. I think New Brunswick is kind of unique in that sense, that the province seems to do more than what other provinces would do in terms of how they do their maintenance on the roads and highways and that sort of thing. So I guess my question is, if municipal reform goes forward, government reform goes forward, and there is a change, a significant change to tax structure, has DTI had any discussions around offloading some of those things that they do now to the municipalities? Should there be some changes in tax structure, which would, again, the tax structure may enable municipalities to have more money, but in turn, has DTI had discussions about downloading some of their responsibility to the municipalities?
Yes, this is a big undertaking to think about municipal reform and what New Brunswick could look like if we look at it in a little different way. So the green paper's been put out. There has been no preconceived idea of what the end result is going to be. The consultations are real. We have not talked about what that will look like. My team is actively involved in the process and interacting on 3 working groups and 2 committees related to tax reform, so our input can be fed into the system. You know, I interact with Minister Alain regularly. We sit beside each other at the cabinet table, so we have open discussions regularly. Communication is open. We're waiting to see what's going to happen too, and DTI is really good at adapting. We're engineers, we're problem solvers, so when some decisions are made around that, we'll find a way to make it work, and just waiting to see what happens as this process is undertaken.
Thank you for that, Minister. And I guess that question too gets back to my earlier comment about, you know, some of the areas that are just outside the city limits that are under provincial jurisdiction, like some of those subdivisions in Pepper Creek. The province has got so much going on, really, with all the roads across the province, that some of those subdivisions don't get the attention they need, and maybe through municipal reform it may incorporate some of them into that. I don't know, again, like you, I know there's no preconceived ideas on how this is going to unfold, but municipal reform and the whole reform package of local government is going to be big. There's no question. And I say that, but then again, it could be nothing. Government may decide to scrap the whole thing. I don't know. We won't draw any conclusions. But I do have some concerns that if there are changes to tax structure, what type of download is going to happen. But I guess it's yet to come. So we'll leave that lie. Just a very basic question that I have here now. In the wintertime, for salt and sand, do we have numbers, does the department have numbers on exactly what it costs for salt and sand, just the raw product, not necessarily the distribution?
I can give you specific down to the dollars, or but I'm going to give you more of a high level. So our sand budget is $3 to $4 million, and our salt budget is about $14 million. There are some infrastructure costs associated with that too, so we're building a couple new salt sheds and making some improvements to some garages, just rehabilitation, and that's about $1.4 million this year in the budget.
Thank you, Minister. Has the department looked at any alternatives to, you know, like just traditional salt usage? I know some areas use a liquid form to work on the roads. I don't know how it works or if it's better or worse or cost, but has the department looked at any other type of options in terms of just traditional methods of maintaining the highways in the winter?
So our P3s, that is our major highways, they do use brine at times on the highway, so that's a mixture of water and salt. We actually use brine on the Miramichi Bridge because sometimes we have freezing problems on that, so the Centennial Bridge. But other than that, we use traditional salt and sand. Although I will say we're always open to new and innovative ways to do things better. And although we're not currently piloting any new technologies or any new ways to de-ice our roadways, we're always open to new ideas and trying new things.
Thank you, Minister. Sticking on highway maintenance, we noticed there's been an increase in the highway maintenance winter budget by $589,000. Can you maybe give us an idea of what these increases are for? Is it just costs of doing business, or is there any special projects that are going to go along with that?
The increase is primarily related to commodity prices, so that would be salt, sand, fuel. So it's to take into account the higher commodity prices.
Thank you, Minister. Similar question in relation to ferry operations. The budget for ferry operations has increased $422,000. Is there anything special in that, or is it kind of along the same lines?
That increase is primarily related to the coastal ferry contract we currently have, and we have a CPI index, or a Consumer Performance Index increase built into that contract, so that's primarily due to that.
Thank you. There's another increase which is in the budget for buildings group, budgeted by increase of $976,000. I believe it's broken down $254,000 for facilities management, an additional $725,000 grant in lieu of municipal real property taxes, basically for the grants to municipalities. Can you give us some idea of what those increases are for, and maybe a little explanation on that?
The breakdown, the 254 in facilities increase would be a combination of lease escalation. So if we have a lease, sometimes escalations are built into the leases for the properties that we do lease. And the other portion would be related to commodities. So maybe snow removal contracts with increases in those values, fuel, labor, those type of costs. So that would be included in the 254. The 725 grants in lieu is actually the property taxes paid on all our government buildings, and they get assessed at a higher value. Just like any homeowner, we have to pay more taxes, and so that's the taxes for all the government buildings in the province that get paid.
That makes sense, especially with the, I don't know if any property is owned by DTI fluctuates with the market. I'm sure it does. If it's property, it goes up and down like everything else. Excuse me, but I appreciate that explanation. One big increase that we've seen was the New Brunswick Highway Corporation increased by $1.47 million from last year's budget. Can you maybe give a little explanation on that as well?
Through the chair, the New Brunswick Highway Corporation is responsible for the P3 highways in our province, and the variation that you see is related to our contract obligations on the different highways with the different groups that we are partners with on those highways. And there is some CPI built in there as well.
Okay, thank you. Excuse me, I want to take a moment and focus in on the pilot project that DTI has with the logging industry. It's my understanding that there's different weight restrictions for certain industry. I'm just wondering if you could maybe explain what that pilot project is and a little more details around it.
So through the chair, I'm actually happy to talk about this one because it's really a great news, I say news, but a great story about working collaboratively with industry. So we do work on identifying strategic corridors around our province to work with industry to ensure that heavier loads are on highways that can accommodate those loads, or we design the highways to accommodate those loads so that they stay on these corridors and don't go on lower weight restricted highways and do damage to them. So the particular pilot project you're talking about is specific to the logging industry, and we are working with different partners, and they're all working in collaboratively together so that either A, they can find a network of their private roads that they would haul most of their heavy loads on, and then we will work strategically with them on small pieces of our highway or our bridges, and we would design them to a higher standard so that they could get to the mills that they need to get to, or certain corridors within our highway network, so that they could self-police themselves, ensure they stayed on those networks and didn't do damage to the rest of our highway network system, which in the end is a savings for all. They have the network they need to take their heavy loads, and then our other roadways are not being damaged by them using them to short circuit the strategic corridor. So it's a great example of how DTI can collaboratively work with industry to try to protect and save our roads and our assets here in New Brunswick.
Thank you, Minister. So if I'm understanding correctly, then this is just very small sections of point A, point B that would be part of this project. And I'm wondering, Minister, if you could tell me what industry players are involved. Is it open to basically any type of logging company or business, or is there just certain players? Like who's involved, I guess, with this partnership with DTI?
Through the chair, the last discussion we had with the logging industry, all players were invited. It's my understanding that all were involved in the discussion, and sometimes it depends on the particular mill or whatnot they want to get to, that we would talk to the ones that would be hauling to that mill. But everyone's involved in the discussion, and all the players are supportive of this, because everybody wins if we have these corridors that makes it so they can haul heavier loads towards and get them to the mills.
Thank you, Minister. And that, because some of the perception that was out there when I got some of the information is that it just is only for certain businesses, that it's not open to everybody. So just so I'm clear, these types of projects in terms of weight restrictions are kind of across the board for logging companies. It's no specific one or two or three. It's just so I'm clear.
Agreements in place now with 2, but we would love to have it with every single player out there. So if we've missed somebody, make sure we know who they are, and we will reach out to them and begin having discussions with them as well.
Thank you, because I would think other logging companies than the 2 would want access to these same types of roads. So understanding that element of it, I'd like to look at it from, I guess, the taxpayer's viewpoint. What assurance do we have as taxpayers to know that, you know, the extra weight that's being put on the road, where normally or in previous times wouldn't be allowed, is now being allowed? How do taxpayers know that it's not creating more damage on the road? And if it is, does the agreement have anything in there that ensures that industry is compensating the taxpayer for the use of those roads if there is more damage?
So through the chair, these relationships we're building are collaborative and positive in nature. So we don't have them set up with a big stick in them to you know, go after industry if they're not doing what they have obligated themselves to. They are self-policing themselves, but we're looking at a cost benefit as well. So if we can have 2 kilometers of highway that they're on that might do a small amount more damage on that highway, and they get off of 58 kilometers of a highway, that's a huge savings to New Brunswick's taxpayers. And so this is how we're looking at this. This is actually a savings to taxpayers, because we're getting them off of our highways, getting them on more private roads, and having smaller sections of highways that they're on. Also going forward, we can build those to a bit of a higher standard so that it can take more traffic from the heavier loads going forward in the future. So all in all, it will be a cost savings to the province, because we're going to be, and we will be having less complaints about beat up highways, because there will be less highways that they will be traveling on in the province.
Okay. I don't think I do have more questions, but have more questions and no more time is the problem. So I think I have about 15, 20 minutes left in my allotment. So I believe education is going to become. So with all that said, Minister, I want to thank you for responding to these questions, and your staff for being here. And again, I look forward to working with you in every area to find you know, the best bang for the taxpayer's buck, I guess, and at the end of the day, and ensure that you know, we continue to do what we can to keep the roads maintained and the infrastructure. So thank you, Minister, and thank you, staff, and thank you, Chair.